Hey everyone, just wanted to say a big thank you. Over 15% of you are already subscribed, and I truly appreciate the support. If you're new and enjoying these stories, consider joining the community by hitting that subscribe button. We're getting closer to 10,000 and every subscriber counts. It was supposed to be just another casual dinner, me, my girlfriend, and her family. We'd been dating for about a year, and while I'd met her parents before, this was the first time I was invited to a formal sit-down meal at their home. I'd brought a bottle of red wine and even dressed a little sharper than usual to show I respected the occasion. But I didn't expect to walk into a dinner where I was clearly the subject of judgment, served alongside the appetizers. From the moment I stepped into their upscale home, I could feel the unspoken tension. Her dad was polite but distant. Her mom, however, had this smug look on her face like she already had me figured out. My girlfriend, Sophie, kept squeezing my hand under the table as if she knew what was coming and didn't want me to react. At first, I tried to brush it off. I answered all their questions respectfully, even when her mom kept bringing up career paths, luxury brands, and the kind of circles they usually moved in. I should have known I was being measured against something I wasn't even told existed. Then came the line that flipped the whole night on its head. We were finishing dessert, some overpriced cheesecake flown in from New York, according to her mom, when she set down her fork, looked straight at me, and said, "You're lucky my daughter even gave you a chance." She didn't laugh alone. Sophie actually chuckled and nodded, adding, "Yeah, I usually date men with real money." The silence that followed hit harder than the words themselves. I just smiled. Not out of agreement, not out of embarrassment, but because in that moment, I realized just how little they knew about me. I wasn't wearing anything flashy. I didn't show up with designer watches or talk about my finances. I wanted to be known for who I was, not what I had. But clearly, that wasn't enough. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I finished my glass of wine, thanked them for the meal, and drove Sophie back to my apartment. She didn't sense the shift in me. She kissed me goodnight like nothing happened, like it was just a funny little jab her mom threw out. The next morning, while she was still asleep, I packed up my things. I left behind the apartment keys, a short note, and one very specific item. A printed copy of the finalized $1.9 million acquisition deal for my tech startup, signed and sealed just days earlier. I placed it neatly on the kitchen counter. By noon, the calls had already started. Sophie, her mom, even her dad. None of them expected it. None of them knew the truth until I walked away. But here's the thing, they all laughed at me that night. Now I'm the only one not laughing. I didn't leave out of anger. That's what confused them the most. There wasn't a scene, no shouting, no drama. Just silence. Clean and deliberate. I knew if I stayed even a minute longer, I'd start questioning myself, start thinking maybe I was overreacting, maybe I was being sensitive. But I wasn't. I had smiled through a dinner where I was essentially told I wasn't good enough. Right to my face. And the one person who should have stood up for me laughed instead. Sophie and I met at a co-working space about a year ago. She was working in fashion marketing, all high energy and polished charm, while I was grinding 14-hour days coding my startup out of a small booth near the back. We started off sharing coffee breaks, slowly moved to lunches, and before long, she was spending nights at my place. We clicked in a way I hadn't felt with anyone in a long time. Or at least, I thought we did. Looking back, there were signs. Subtle comments about how cute my tiny apartment was, or how she could never drive a used car. She'd talk about the kind of lifestyle she wanted. Nothing wrong with dreaming big. But her dreams always seemed to revolve around yachts, private schools, and designer handbags. I thought it was just talk. I believed she liked me for who I was, that she saw something in me even before the money showed up. I mean, when we started dating, I didn't have much at all. I had debt, stress, and a big idea. And she chose to be with me then. So I assumed that meant something real. What she didn't know was that, during all those long nights when she teased me for being too busy or buried in work, I was finalizing meetings with investors. The startup I'd built, quietly and without fanfare, had started gaining traction in a niche industry. A few months ago, a bigger tech firm approached me with an acquisition offer. After some back and forth, the deal closed at just under $2 million. I didn't tell anyone, not even Sophie. I wanted to make sure it was real first. And maybe, deep down, I wanted to see who stuck around when I wasn't flashing any wealth. So when her mom made that comment and Sophie laughed like it was some inside joke, it hit differently. Not just because it was rude, but because it revealed something. It wasn't about money. It was about value. I realized I was sitting at a table with people who measured worth by status, not by character. And the person I thought was my partner didn't push back. She didn't even flinch. Now they want explanations. They want to know why I left without warning. They keep calling, texting, saying it was just a joke. That her mom didn't mean it, that Sophie was just nervous. But here's the thing, when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. The first call came from Sophie around 10 a.m. I let it ring. Then the texts started coming, one after another. Can we talk? I'm so confused, where are you? What's going on? I didn't respond. I needed time to think. Not just about her, but about everything that night had revealed. There's a kind of pain that doesn't come from yelling or fighting. It comes from realizing the person lying next to you never really saw you at all. By noon, her mom texted too. The same woman who barely made eye contact with me over dinner now suddenly had a lot to say. Please call Sophie back. She's really upset. That wasn't meant to hurt you. Then another message followed, one that made me sit back and just stare at the screen. I think we may have misunderstood you. Can we meet again and talk this out? Misunderstood. That word echoed. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a perfectly clear message. I didn't look the part. I didn't fit into their world. I just hadn't been wearing my price tag out in the open. Sophie's best friend, Marissa, called me next. I hadn't expected that. Look, I know you're hurt, she said, not even waiting for me to say hello. But Sophie really cares about you. She was just nervous that night. Her mom's always been like that, judgy, snobbish. Sophie laughed stuff off to keep the peace. She didn't mean anything by it. I stayed quiet. It wasn't just about that one dinner. It was about every moment that now felt staged. All the little digs about my lifestyle, all the moments I excused as harmless quirks. Maybe they weren't quirks at all. Maybe she'd been waiting for me to become someone else this whole time, someone who drove the right car, wore the right watch, dropped the right names. I thought about telling Marissa everything, the deal, the money, the reason I stayed quiet for so long. But I didn't. That wasn't the point. This wasn't about proving anything. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about respect. And once that's gone, what's left? Later that day, I got an email from Sophie. A long one. She started with an apology, saying she felt embarrassed and heartbroken, and that she didn't mean to laugh. She said she was proud of me, even if she didn't always show it. But buried deep in the message, she also wrote something that stood out more than all the apologies combined. I just wish you told me about the money sooner. Maybe my family would have seen you differently. And that was it. That sentence. That quiet confession. She didn't deny how her family thought. She didn't challenge their values. She just wished I'd made it easier for them to accept me. As if my worth only counted once I proved I could pay to be at the table. I stared at the screen, the words burning in my head. Maybe I hadn't changed. Maybe she hadn't either. But one thing was certain, this wasn't the love I thought I had. The next few days felt like walking through fog. I wasn't sleeping well. I kept replaying that dinner in my head, her mom's voice, the way Sophie laughed, that tiny smirk like it was all just some joke I wasn't in on. But underneath the disappointment, something else had started building. Not anger exactly, but a sense of finality. A quiet understanding that things couldn't go back to how they were. Not after what was said. Not after what was left unsaid. Sophie kept reaching out. More texts. More voicemails. Some sounded panicked, others sad, and a few tried to be light-hearted, like nothing serious had happened. "Can we just talk face to face?" she said in one message. "I'll come by. We don't even have to talk about my mom." But we did. That was the problem. We had to talk about all of it. By the third day, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. When I played it back, I nearly laughed. It was her dad. The same man who barely looked at me across the table now had plenty to say. He kept it short and formal, but the message was clear. He wanted a meeting. "I think there are some misunderstandings that need clearing up. Perhaps we could talk man to man." Man to man? That phrase hit wrong. Where was that energy when I was sitting across from him, trying to be respectful while his wife insulted me? Now they all wanted clarity, closure, maybe even forgiveness. But none of them wanted to admit they were wrong. They just wanted me back in the box they could understand. I ignored the call. That night, I took a walk around the block, trying to clear my head. I stopped by the coffee shop where Sophie and I first met. It was almost empty, quiet except for a student on a laptop and the sound of milk steaming. I sat at our old table and tried to picture that first conversation, how excited she was about a new campaign she was launching, how curious she'd been about my startup. It felt so far away now, like someone else's story. When I got home, Sophie was sitting on the steps of my apartment building. I froze. She looked up at me with red eyes, holding something in her hands. It was the folder I had left, the one with the startup deal. "You really sold it," she said quietly. "You didn't tell me. Not even a hint." I didn't respond. I just stood there. She got up and stepped closer. "Was I really that bad?" Her voice cracked. "Was that one moment enough to throw everything away?" It wasn't just one moment. It was the whole picture. And now we were both standing at the edge of something that used to feel like love but had changed shape completely. She reached out, barely touching my arm. I didn't move. Neither of us said a word. The weight between us was louder than anything we could say. I stood there, frozen, her fingers brushing against my arm like she was trying to hold on to something that had already slipped away. The silence stretched between us, and I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't just sorry, she was scared. Scared that I had changed. Scared that the version of me who used to look at her like she was the center of the world wasn't standing in front of her anymore. "Sophie," I finally said, my voice lower than I expected. "It wasn't just what your mom said. It was that you didn't even blink." "I was nervous," she said quickly. "You know how she is. She's always like that, and I didn't want to start a scene." "You didn't have to start a scene," I said. "You just had to choose a side. And you didn't choose mine." She looked down at the folder in her hands, the contract sticking slightly out of the edge. "You know what hurts the most," she whispered. "Not that you left. Not even that you didn't tell me about the sale. It's that you didn't think I was worth explaining it to." That stung. Because maybe she was right in her own way. Maybe I didn't give her a chance to redeem herself. But before I could even process what to say, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and hesitated, then silenced it. "Who was that?" I asked, more out of instinct than curiosity. She hesitated. "My mom." I nodded, ready to end the conversation, when she said something that stopped me cold. She wants to talk to you again, not just about dinner. She saw the contract. She wants to invest in your next project. I blinked. What? She said she might have been too quick to judge. That maybe you have more potential than she realized. There it was. The second twist I didn't see coming. This wasn't about apologies. This wasn't about love or regret. This was about opportunity. They didn't want me back. They wanted a piece of the win they had almost laughed out of the room. Now that the money was real, now that they saw I had something they could gain from, the tables turned. You're serious? I said, stunned. She said she's connected to some people, investors, VCs. She thinks she can open doors for you now. She wants to meet. I couldn't help but let out a short laugh, but it was bitter sharp. She wants to meet the man she humiliated over cheesecake, now that he has a price tag she respects. Sophie didn't argue. She didn't deny it. That silence, again, said everything. In that moment, everything clicked into place. This wasn't about love anymore. It was about power. About status. About how fast people shift when they think they missed out on something valuable. And just like that, the game changed. Because now, they weren't just trying to fix a relationship. They were trying to buy their way into a future I had already started without them. I stood there, staring at Sophie, trying to wrap my head around the fact that her mom, who barely acknowledged me as worthy of her daughter, now wanted to talk business. It wasn't even subtle. It wasn't about an apology or reconciliation. It was about money, plain and simple. I looked at Sophie and asked the one question I'd been avoiding all along. If I never made that sale, would any of this be happening? She looked away, and that was all the answer I needed. I nodded slowly, my chest tightening. I don't need your mom's money. I never did. She's just trying to fix things, her way, Sophie said, sounding almost embarrassed. This whole situation got out of control. Can't we just go back to what we had? But we couldn't. Too much had been said. Too much had been revealed. The person standing in front of me wasn't the girl I fell for at that coffee shop. Or maybe she was, and I just hadn't wanted to see it before. Still, part of me wanted closure. So I agreed to meet her parents. Not for a second chance. Not to make peace. But because I needed them to hear something directly from me, something I should have said that night at the dinner table. We met at a fancy rooftop restaurant her mom recommended. Private, quiet, with a view of the city skyline. Her mom smiled when she saw me, a sharp contrast from the first time we met. Her dad shook my hand more firmly. Sophie sat next to me, like she was part of a team again. Her mom started the conversation with a compliment about my ambition and vision. She mentioned a few contacts in the venture capital world. Then she laid it out, casually and clean. If you're planning a new startup, I'd love to help secure funding. I believe in supporting people who prove themselves. There it was. Prove themselves. I leaned back, took a breath, and smiled. I appreciate the offer, I said. But I'm not taking any outside funding. Especially not from people who couldn't respect me when they thought I had nothing. Her face stiffened, but she kept her smile. It was a misunderstanding. No, I said gently. It was crystal clear. And I needed that. Sophie looked nervous, her fingers tapping the side of her glass. So, what now? I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope. I handed it to her and stood up. Inside was a photo. The same one that used to sit on my desk, me and Sophie at the coffee shop, laughing over a cold latte. On the back, I had written just one sentence. We were real before the world made it about everything else. I walked away without turning back. I knew this was the end of that chapter. But as I stepped into the elevator, my phone buzzed with a message from someone unexpected. Marissa. It simply said, "I need to tell you something about Sophie. It's bigger than you think." I sat in my car for a while, staring at Marissa's message. My mind raced with possibilities, but part of me was already exhausted. I had walked away, finally and fully, and now here was one last thread pulling me back. Still, curiosity got the better of me. I replied, "What do you mean?" A minute later she called. "I didn't want to say anything before," she began, voice low. "But Sophie's been planning something behind your back for a while. After she found out about your startup deal, before you left, she told her mom. Not in passing. They looked you up. Googled your name, your business, everything. And her mom told her to keep quiet about it so they could play it smart." I felt my stomach tighten. "So that dinner she knew," Marissa said. "Sophie knew exactly what her mom thought of you. And she still let her run her mouth like that. It was all part of their plan. Her mom even told her to stay close in case you turned out to be worth something." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. It all made sense now, the sudden warmth, the business talk, the misunderstanding they tried to paint over. It was never just about love. It was about leverage. And I was the investment. Marissa sighed. "I know she hurt you. I just thought you should know the full truth." "Thanks," I said quietly. "I really mean it." After we hung up, I took a deep breath and looked out at the city. Funny how quickly people change once they think you're useful. But that wasn't love. That wasn't loyalty. That wasn't anything I wanted to build a future with. Over the next few weeks, I focused on myself. I took a short trip, cleared my head, and started sketching out ideas for my next project. No distractions. No masks. Just real work, and real people around me who didn't care about dollar signs. I never responded to Sophie again. She kept trying for a while, apologies, explanations, even a voicemail where she cried and said she missed the way we used to be. But what we used to be had been slowly unraveling long before that dinner. It just took one moment to see the truth clearly. Sometimes, it's not about what people say when they think you're successful. It's about how they treat you when they believe you have nothing. That's where character shows. That's when you see what love is actually made of. I learned that lesson the hard way, but I'm grateful for it now. Because walking away was the best decision I ever made. Not just from Sophie, but from the version of myself that kept settling for less than he deserved. And somewhere out there, I hope she's thinking about the moment I smiled through the insult, then walked away with more dignity than she ever gave me credit for.